I find one of the most efficient things a household can do is not get AI. It is to say, is the right person in this house doing the right task?
Ellie Windle, founder and CEO at Persist.
My partner has ADHD and dyslexia. Why was he the one doing our researching insurance and doing our taxes? He's a former paramedic and firefighter. Why was he the one, why am I negotiating with the doctor and being involved in these emergency situations? There were some obvious things that we were like, oh, let's just swap them. And our household got far more efficient in a day. This is not sustainable. Inequity of division of labor is harming families. It's harming children and mothers, and it's costing companies a lot of money. And I think this is where we get to the heart of the problem, which is how much of this do we solve with technology? I thought about that, or how do we do that?
I'm so delighted that you asked, because it gives me the opportunity to share my theory, which is that all right. Thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. As I was looking forward to it, I was remembering when we first met many years ago now, and that was a wonderful connection. And then we ended up working together at White Ops now.
I'd like to believe in many cases because of how fond I was of you. The first time I met you, actually, we were in Vegas at a fancy restaurant, and you ordered dessert first. And we hadn't really gotten into the meat of business yet, but that was quite an introduction. And I loved what you guys were doing, and it really inspired me to kind of go the other direction from really focusing on advertising technology and programmatic, and how do you efficiently get your ad in front of the right person at the right time, to thinking about how do you protect the humanity of people on the web, and really going to the core of it. And it was wonderful to work with you there. And I'm curious if you remember, it was probably within the first 2 or 3 months that you had shared a document with the company about how you were trying to automate your life. And you were saying, I'm so frustrated with the fact that it feels like this could be easier. There could be a more efficient way to do this. And you built a little bit of I don't think decision tree is the right way to describe it. How would you describe what you put together?
Right. Well, at first, I was thinking about it as the documentation of my personal operating system.
Yes.
And but unlike some documentation, it wasn't just procedural, this is how it works. I was also asking why questions, and trying to explain my intent. I mean, what kind of life do I want to live? And I didn't set out to write that. What I set out to do was find the manual of life, or even just the table of contents. As an adult, what are the things I'm supposed to do, right? I wanted the list so I could compare myself to it. Have I thought of everything? The answer is no, you probably haven't thought of everything. And moreover, I totally failed to find that book. I failed to find the operating manual for life. So I just found that I had to make my own.
Well, and I think, that was very inspiring to me, along with when I had my second baby and realizing that the amount of invisible labor, right? This unspoken, undocumented, unobservable set of things that make your life function, right? What decision, you aren't really consciously thinking all the time about what are my values, what are my preferences, where am I trying to go, in the micro decisions you make every single day. And especially as a parent, when that mental load of, are they hitting their milestones? Do I need to book them a doctor appointment? Are they a little bit warm? Are they eating enough? It's just constant worry and constant things that you need to anticipate and do next. And that's when I really was thinking about your document and starting to think, particularly around the parenting angle, how can we make this work more observable? How can we help automate it or make it more efficient in some way? Because people are hurting, but families particularly. I don't know if you saw the Surgeon General announced an advisory a couple weeks ago, basically saying that parents are not okay, that the stress levels are dangerous levels, and basically a sort of a call to action for companies and communities and frankly government to be doing more to basically understand this immense amount of work, hidden work that families are participating in.
Yeah, yeah. And whenever you see that, I think there's an open question, which is this is this a reality? Is life actually harder, or is this generation somehow lazier? And the when I looked at this, I recall reading an article describing millennials as the burnout generation. And it's particularly when you apply a label like that to specifically a generation, it calls into focus like, well, is this generation somehow less capable, or is life somehow harder than it was, say, 50 years ago? And my answer, the conclusion that I drew, is that the novelty of the problems of this age really is greater. So more of us are facing more novel problems, which literally increases the cognitive load of dealing with those problems, and it increases the complexity coordination costs of your life. And in some ways, we, I think many would agree that this society is more atomized than early generations. And that, I think, plays a factor because it means that um, the our networks are more distended. So it's also harder. It's not just harder to get help. It's harder to figure out what problems are like normal and what is just very specific to you.
What else I'll say about this, a couple things that is really important, is particularly for the millennial generation. So, a couple things that are true. One, boomer parents that raised millennials did a pretty incredible job of teaching their daughters that they could do anything, right? You see that in the rates of doctors and lawyers and astronauts and professional athletes. And there was a mantra that for a lot of women, like, you can do it, you can have the career. But what was not happening simultaneously was teaching sons what that would mean for them as fathers and partners. And so you have this mismatch where, for the first time, you have really, truly dual income households with demanding careers. And you still see more than 75% of the domestic labor defaulting still to the primary caregiver, typically the woman. So you have a really unique part where men did not have the modeling for them around what it means to be a co-parent, what it means to share the load efficiently, what, like, that was less something that they were taught. And so we are sort of at this unique moment where particularly women and primary caregivers are carrying far more than they were ever carrying. And with the boomer generation getting older and quite a large generation, millennials are simultaneously taking care of their parents and their children because they waited longer to have children. And so you have this crisis of caregiving where, on top of the dynamics I just said, your caregiving has exploded. Parents are living longer. The medical, capacity is getting more complex navigating that system. And so you really do have sort of a perfect storm that I do think is unique, a unique moment and I think that's really where Persist comes in, which is, this is not sustainable. This inequity of division of labor is harming families. It's harming children and mothers, and it's costing companies a lot of money. And I think this is where we get to the heart of the problem, which is, how much of this do we solve with technology? How much of can we throw a bunch of AI on this problem and make it better? I would argue no, but there is a huge role it can play, and I'm excited to get into it. But some of the foundational things is about valuing this work and understanding how complex it is and valuing somebody's time, right? Like as we think about automating this invisible work, how many people are aware of that invisible work, can talk about it, can describe it, can describe how they make decisions, right? There's sort of a little bit of a black hole right now in terms of how to layer on technology.
Right. I think one of the things that I was grappling with when I was working on that documentation is actually trying to make a map of the program management of life. Like, what is the scope of managing my life? What are the departments? And program management is its own job. So if you don't have a very accurate mental model of what the scope of that management work is, then of course you cannot evenly divide it up, right? Like much of it is essentially invisible to you. And this comes into focus if you try to get help, right? So
Yes.
it seems, and of course we've all struggled with this when running startups as well. And if the company is growing fast, you have to transition from being an individual contributor to hiring help and managing people. And it's actually really hard to stop your ICE work in order to do the hard work of hiring and then the hard work of onboarding. And so at first, when you get someone to help you, there aren't immediate benefits at all. There's actually immediate costs. Now you have someone to manage, right? So if you're privileged enough to have a personal assistant, in terms of being able to afford that with dollars, you also have to figure out a way to afford that with time and management energy. And clearly some people who could theoretically afford it with dollars can't spare the energy and the time to make that happen. And part of that barrier, I think, is not knowing what the scope of life management really is. So if we're all burned out, if we all face too much work, you can't hire your way out. What we're saying is that life in some ways is too complex for everybody. So I think it has to be technology. Play this out for everyone. Some people can offload some work to assistants, but those people are living lives that are too complicated. So they need assistance. So then it's assistance all the way down until someone can't afford one. So either we need to literally reduce the complexity of life.
Yes, that's one.
Or, right, we need to add tools that can literally make people more capable of getting more things done. And I don't know how to reduce life's complexity, so I've just got to bet on technology.
Yeah, I think what the hope is to do a little bit of both. I think the other thing I'll say is that I've mentioned before, but I do think is really important is valuing the work. Because I like that you brought in the startup example, because what I find a little mind blowing is that as a CEO and a startup founder, people give you the anticipating the needs of the business, planning, thinking 2 years in the future. What is my roadmap? Where do we want to go? What is our mission? That is very valued in the workplace. And you get to be a CEO and people say, wow, you're doing the hard part. You're doing the vision and mission. And then people more junior than you are executing that work. But in the home, that invisible work is the work of where is our family going? What do we need? What are our values? What needs to happen? And that work is typically done by the woman and thought of as women's work, right? That's not important work. Like things just get done. It's not that hard to run a household. And that is bizarre to me, right? That we know that it is executive functioning to anticipate needs and to plan and to consider other people's needs. We value it and pay for that in the workplace, but we really don't in the same way for domestic needs. So I think as we think about how do we build the technology for it, how do we automate it, it's one, appreciating how complex and how important that work is and not diminishing it. And it's so exciting that there are now that people are considering how do we add technology to help families, because I think for so long it was just not considered hard. Like we don't even. So I'm excited that many people now are recognizing just how challenging this problem is to solve. Like as we're talking now, a lot of this conversation of like, how can AI help predict and fulfill household needs for you? Like, what things can it take off your plate with what value? It's, I always keep coming to the fact of it is helping you do something incredibly complex and valuable as a very like important baseline statement.
Right, right. Yeah, I think we can all feel the difference in a workplace between uh, a workplace that has great ops, where just operationally the company knows what it needs to do, the individuals know what they need to do in order to contribute to the company mission, and just the strategy and the execution, it ties out, it fits together. And the climate of those workplaces is frankly better. It's more comfortable to be in a climate like that than in a workplace with bad ops. Might have an appealing mission, might have some good ideas, might even have very hardworking people, but when it doesn't all fit, it doesn't feel good. So why wouldn't the same thing apply to a household? Household ops could be great and therefore make everyone feel good. Literally, the climate is better, or it could be bad. And I think we all have a sense for that feeling, the difference between those two climates. But it's frankly unknown what to do to get from bad ops to good ops. I think, right? Like I'm not reading any McKinsey articles about household climate and life ops.
Yeah. There is a book that I've just started reading. I think it's called "Speak to Me Like I'm Someone You Love," and it's really the zero tech version of what you're describing around. Think of it as an offsite at a startup, but it's the two, adults in a partnership having a discussion about what does good look like? Where do we want to go? What are we trying to do? What are our values? What are our standards? And seeking to understand, like, and my hope, and certainly what we're gambling on as a business, is that the same information that you need to communicate to the supercomputer in your house, your partner, around how do we get on the same page? How do we get our operating system humming because you and I are on the same page? Is the exact type of information and framework that can allow a computer to start to do some of it for you. But without some of this foundational judgment information, like how does your family make decisions, right? And I think if a couple can't explain it to each other, I really find it hard to believe that there's going to be some magical tech that can solve it without unpacking some of that foundational stuff. And so I'm curious from your perspective, if you have any hunches of like, what is the most predictive pieces of data that could exist, that exists maybe today in someone's brain, or maybe it's just data their life's already producing, it's their health and their calendar data. But do you think there's one or two linchpin pieces of data that really start to make AI possible for?
Wow. All right. So first, I just want to highlight the supreme power of the question, what does good look like? The going back to my workplace experience, the hardest parts about growing wide ops after it reached a certain heft is that I felt like I had a very good understanding of like what good engineering looks like. I did not have a particularly good understanding of what a great customer success department looks like. It was just outside of my experience. So because I didn't have a mental model of excellence, it was very hard for me to um, like judge that aspect of our operation. Um, and I think that's actually a generically hard or a generally hard problem. For instance, if you look at Nobel Prize winners in sciences, almost everyone who goes on to extraordinary accomplishment had a formative experience earlier in their career at someone else's absolutely badass lab. So they got they got this aha, like, oh, that's what my peers are capable of, and maybe I could become capable of as well. Um, and like, if you don't know, you don't know. So in the workplace, we see that pattern again and again, which is um, the the people who achieve great heights got exposed to what greatness looks like early on. This is not an exclusive path to success. Several of Mark Zuckerberg's early hires are still with the company, and I heard Mark describe himself and those early hires as like figuring out how to work. And they were really committed to it, so therefore they figured out something that would work at least very well for their company. So I do think that there are ways of achieving really high standards without having been exposed to someone else's first. But it's unquestionably harder, and so we probably just inherit some standards from our childhood environment.
Exactly.
Um,
Yes.
right. And,
And those
and,
can be
and
very different standards between
that's
the
right.
two.
Like why would you ever guess that two married people are going to have the same opinions of what good looks like just because they happen to love each other? Right. Like it's not loving each other that informs what good looks like. It's your prior experiences. That's
Exactly.
wild. Oh my God. Right. And it's really hard to teach an AI that, but at least we could teach the AI to ask the question.
Yeah, definitely. And here's another topic that I wanted to get your thoughts on this note between like who should be making the decision, right? Because let's say I can perfectly create a digital twin. We actually did it. We're able to like pull all the way I make decisions, think my values, and I'm able to ask myself questions, and I'm also able to send digital Ellie out into the internet to go ask companies some questions like, does this product do this? Does it like try to like go do a version of me is doing this research and coming back and saying, hey, I think you should buy this stroller because I've looked them all up or whatever. And that it's literally the same as if I had done it, but I don't have to. I'm just getting back the research. And I think in certain areas, I would love that. I'd want to send my digital twin out. But I think actually for a whole host of things, I'd want to hire someone else's digital twin, like somebody who knows a ton about health insurance, somebody who knows every single thing about IRAs or whatever, and say, go find me the best one because you know what good looks like. And at this, like, kind of marry, like, you know what I need and what good looks like for me, but you also know what good looks like in this particular category. And so, how can you kind of supercharge your digital twin with somebody that does have maybe unique skills in that? Like, what a relief would it be to feel like you're getting the exact recommendation that's the best it can be for you? Like, how realistic do you think that is? How do you think about this type of approach with digital twins or AI?
Well, you actually described my entire gift giving strategy. My gift giving strategy begins with a goal, which is I want the perceived value of the gift to be higher than its monetary cost to me. Because if it's not, I should have just handed you cash, right?
It's a good point.
So how do you achieve that delta? I achieve it in two ways. One is I try to give someone a gift that, of course, is an object, but is a symbol that I have really listened and really understood something. So then the gift is, it's honestly the gift of feeling understood. and and like tragically, that can be a very rare feeling. Right? So sometimes it's that it's a symbol of listening. But then my other form of gift giving is to give a gift of my time and discernment in determining that this thing is the best of its category for you. Like, I have looked at the universe of chef knives for you. Now you don't have to just use this one. Or this is the best titanium pen anyone has ever fabricated. Something like that. So then the exchange is that I put my time and energy into this expertise. So it's kind of like you get this thing without the cognitive load.
That's what I want to deliver. That's the dream, where you have a Michael Tiffany finding you with all of the brain power and compassion and understanding of like, this is going to be the best knife. Like, can you imagine as you're going through your life saying, it looks like you're going to be making a delicious meal for guests tomorrow. Like, this is the knife you need for that, whatever. It just could constantly delight somebody to have the best possible solution at that moment without just, I love that sense of delight when you give a gift they love, but also receiving that gift and being like, this is incredible. Like, I wouldn't have bought this for myself. I would have never found this. And I love it.
Yeah. So I do think that that technology can scalably improve on exactly that. And I do think that this age with increasingly capable AI, but especially in natural language understanding, and we're starting to see improvements in reasoning, is really going to help. And it's really going to help to everyone's benefit, because the value that we just described for the recipient is, I think, also a source of value to the makers, right? So what we're trying to do is add wisdom and insight to match the inventors of products and the creators of wonderful things with exactly the right people to benefit from them. And there's lots of reasons to be annoyed by ads, but in its purest, most pro-social form, it is actually gatekeeperless connection making between the people who've made something and the people who can benefit from it. And that's fantastic. But I don't think that real-time bidding over ads to distract you on the sides and edges of content is the only way to connect inventors with the people who would benefit from it, right?
People don't prefer that to be the way that they're introduced to.
So what if that's just growth phase 1 of the internet, and we're about to enter growth phase 2, where we can do this matchmaking
much more curated?
Yeah.
And we were already seeing this in ad tech before I got out of it, right? The first phase was, I love programmatic because it's a massive amount of very, very cheap inventory, right? And I can pick the very best one out of all of them. Turns out most of those are crap. And you don't want to be bidding along a huge bucket of bad impressions and trying to pick out the few good ones. Much better to have a curated marketplace where all of them are good impressions, and there's just some that might be a little bit better for you. And I think, in my mind, I'm curious if you agree, I see the next phase being much more curated, in that you're in, like, if you're served an ad in a certain environment, or your recommendation is made to you, it is going to be, well, also to your value prop at Fulcra Dynamics, I think, rather than the data being secretly stolen from you and then used to target you with ads, it is willingly given for the value exchange of, I only want recommendations that have been vetted, that are going to be great for me, that aren't going to distract me, aren't going to annoy me, aren't going to interrupt my program, but I am open to receiving suggestions, but there's some additional protection for the user, right? And I'm curious if that's, what does the internet look like to you in the coming years?
I think it's an internet where agent to agent communication measured in bytes becomes the majority of internet traffic. So, um, the looking at specifically this problem, which is in some ways, I want to be informed by innovators who have cool products. I actually like, please sell me stuff that's going to improve my life. I want to buy life improvement. I'm in the market. Today, the way you get me is literally by distracting me, right? Like I'm actually reading something else. I'm watching something else. This ad is a distraction, and if the ad does its job, it succeeds at distracting me, and then I get into a purchase funnel. Well, that is not elegant. That's kind of ridiculous. Um, what if you pitch my agent? My agent knows what I want.
Yeah, your gatekeeper. You have to go through
That's
a
right.
first. Yeah, I love that.
That's right. And I think that merchants benefit from this as well because it's a waste of time and money to pitch someone who's never going to buy your thing. So if my agent knows me very, very well and is essentially able to um, sift through a massive number of commercial offerings and be like, these are the two I'm going to show Michael, that would be just as good for me as it would be for the two winning merchants. So I strongly suspect that the next model of solving this problem, that like the product discovery and audience discovery two-sided problem, instead of being intermediated through distraction media, it'll be intermediated through agents, and I'm excited about it. I think this will literally be like pro-social. It'll be good for everybody.
I think so too. And I'm curious the environment. Certainly what we're trying to build at Persist is, a place where you have the trust and comfort to be able to put some really critical information about how your family
Right,
makes
right,
decisions, both at a very high level of values, but all some like very tactical things of like what is needed to get a task done. Some of that we
yeah,
can auto generate, we can populate for them, but there are
right.
some tasks that need very detailed instructions. But I think of it as sort of the filter by which you start looking at your life. Like, why go searching the web when you could have it go through your agent, right? Go through this system that already knows all these things about you and is going to filter out a majority of what you could see or buy to the things that, in my mind, like that's obviously happening in a Persist dashboard. That's a dream, but realistically, is this ultimately happening in a device that follows you around, right? This is something you're speaking into your phone or a floating orb. Like, where do you see, like, what devices are people using in the future to filter this thing? Like, are these product recommendations coming, as you're walking to the, down the street and it's saying, oh, you should pop in that store. They have the cupcakes you're going to love, right? Like, I'm curious how you think it's like going to actually manifest.
Oh, good. Right. I mean, I kind of think you nailed it. So the um, I think that I think what we're describing is an emergent phenomenon of the interaction of a lot of different intelligences that change the way the smart devices around us function. So that was stated very generally. Now let me make that more specific. Any of us who have installed smart devices in our homes, like maybe you've got smart switches, you can control the lights with your phone. Maybe you've got an internet connected scale. None of these things are intelligent, right? They're just like incrementally connected, and so they're not they they're not superpowering your life, right? It's just like tiny conveniences. However, when they can be part of a cohesive unit all working to serve you, then we can actually achieve some pretty extraordinary lifestyle and behavior changes. And so that is about achieving ambient awareness from these various connected devices, and then catching you at just the right time to ask a question, or nudge you in a way that you actually want to be nudged. And that's a on its face, it's a crazy thing, but we've all experienced this. The Greeks called it akrasia. It's how we don't do what we say we want to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just a limitation of our meat space brain. Like there's literally only so many things we can hold in our attention at any given time. So this future that we're describing is one where the intelligence around us actually very usefully augments our meat space brain, making us all a little more like a super intelligence.
I have a question for you that is taking us in a slightly different direction, but it's another thing I've been mulling over. So today, you can exchange money to get time back. If you are lucky enough to have money, you can pay for a personal assistant, you can hire a chef, you can, right? We sort of understand of like, okay, I can get someone else to do this if I have money. What I am really gets me excited is the idea of using technology to rebuild community for those that do not have money to be able to exchange. And you said it early, families are so much more atomized now, and like the modern nuclear family is brand new, and it creates a lot of independence. There are a lot of benefits, but it also is not very efficient because every single house in the block is making a meal at the same time, and they're both driving their kids to soccer at the same time, and like it's not a great way to do it, right? Like when we use, I don't want to glorify the past. I don't think it was better, but when you are in a more communal setting, when you are living in a multi-generational household or with, cousins, you can, you watch all the kids on one day, and then you have the next couple of days, no kids, or you make the meals for all 5 families on one day and you have meals the other. And like, what I would love to use AI for, or automation, is basically for people to be able to say, here's what I have. I make meals on Mondays. I go to this location to drop off soccer every day, and I am great at ironing laundry. These are things I can do. And I want meals on Tuesday, Wednesdays. I want someone to drive my other kid in the other direction on Wednesdays. And you're able to match and make households more efficient by simply rebuilding community and saying, why are we doing everything at the same time? Like, one of us could be cooking and one of us could be watching the kids and one of us could be relaxing if we could work together in some scalable capacity. Have you thought about that, or how do we do that?
I'm so delighted that you asked, because it gives me the opportunity to share my theory, which is that there are 2 problems to solve here. One is the obvious one, which is which is the coordination complexity problem, right? Like, so how do we coordinate in order to effectively cooperate? Okay. Yep, computationally hard problem, but at least we know the shape of it. There's a hidden problem. The hidden problem is about trust. It's not just how do I trust people, because the trust is a single word that covers multiple forms. I can trust your judgment. I can trust your competence. I can trust that you have my best interests in mind. So there are these core distinct elements of trust. And so it's not a binary. It's not like I trust you or I don't. There are kind of component virtues of trust, and each of those component virtues of trust are actually built incrementally from what I'll call micro trust moments. So if we want a community to trust each other, if we want 10 neighbors to come to trust each other, the actual path is to create micro trust moments between the 10 of them so they can eventually earn each other's trust. And that's really hard, right? And that takes buffer. There needs to be space for those micro trust moments. So if we're all living lives of being overwhelmed, we can't even fit those moments in. So then of course we will never have high trust relationships with our neighbors. So can we solve this problem? Yes, I think we can. I think we can solve this problem. I think technology serves a role because we can use the tools that are themselves providing like observability over our own lives to create little things that can be shared to try to open up these micro trust moments, so that people can either accept and earn a little bit of trust, or shy away from.
Like an Uber driver score, right? Like
That's right. That's right.
you can have a community score across different things around, and I mean, it's great. I feel like if we would have had this conversation 20 years ago, it would have been a little insane to think a stranger is going to show up at your house. You are going to get in a car with that stranger and they're going to take you somewhere. And you are going to, like, that sounds insane. And now it's just a very common thing that happens. And I rarely even look at their Uber rating before getting in. Like I probably should, but I'm hopeful that we were able, like the gig economy and the way that we stay in strangers' house. You can put your house, list, and you can have someone staying in your bedroom 2 days later. Like these things are kind of insane and happening. So I love your framework. How could we, if you when you first join this community, right, you start with a score of 0 and then you are earning that trust in these microwaves, but in a visible way for other people. So they know.
I think one of the most important things you said was actually how you hardly even check the ratings anymore. Let's think about how that works. Essentially, there's a body of knowledge that there's a thing that didn't exist in the world and now it does, which is this giant ratings corpus that so much human energy has gone into that you can now kind of take it for granted that almost any random driver is probably pretty trustworthy, right? That's awesome, right? So that was bootstrapped. Like in our lifetimes, there was no trust corpus, and now there's such a large one that you don't even need to check all the time. You're just like, if it's still working, this is probably going to work out for me, right? So that's actually an awesome state, right? Like that means that the investment worked. So I do think that there's way more potential for solving human coordination complexity problems, like in these directions, and so I anticipate not just innovation but also breakthrough. Though getting tactical for a moment, tactical in like very 2024. One of the reasons I was very excited to have you on the podcast is my own experience specifically with Persist of actually showing me that table of contents I always wanted. Like, again, speaking of like a corpus of wisdom that I just get to use without having to think it through. I loved your questions. Like part of trying to divvy up household chores is actually thinking through what are all of them. Again, like if not, what does excellence look like? What are my standards, right? It's not from lack of motivation, but rather lack of knowledge of all the questions to ask. you closed that gap for me and made me realize, oh wow, I'm totally dropping the ball in these parts of life. The table
Yeah.
of contents is so important.
And the great news is, if as a user of Persist, you don't have to complete your whole household manual and answer every single question across 75 tasks and do this whole thing. It really is about starting where you most need the help and most need to communicate, so that you can either share it with your partner or outsource it, and trying not to boil the ocean, right? Like really focusing on the questions that are actually going to improve your shared awareness in your house and improve the division of labor as well as efficiency. So I think, thank you for saying that. It's we now have the free care load assessment, which we've had, I think at this point, about 2,000 people have taken in the last couple of months, which is just on our website. And you can really quickly go through the 75 tasks and say who primarily does them today. And it outputs essentially like how much time is currently going into making your household function. How is that being shared today? And the big one that is proprietary that we haven't talked about today, but I'm excited about, is the concept of care load, which is how heavy is a task? Because the other thing, it's not just how much time something takes. We know tasks aren't created equal, but some tasks are just heavier. Like taking care of your sick parent, right, is emotional, it's mental, happens every single day. You probably have time-bound parts of that where you have to pick them up or drop them off or take them to doctors. There are parts of that that probably make you really uncomfortable and that you dislike. So in our system, that would have a care load of 5, meaning this has a lot of things that make this task heavy. And simply being able to look at, is somebody carrying the tasks that happen at the same time every day? That person has a lot less autonomy than a person who has tasks that they can kind of do whenever it suits them. And I think it sounds very basic especially in this conversation when we're talking about, AI and flying orbs that can do things for you. But in the world of 2024, simply being able to have a discussion around the complexity of the things that you're doing and carrying, and what is hard for you and what is scary for you and what is maybe easier for your partner for whatever reason. And just saying, are we actually talking about efficiency? I find one of the most efficient things a household can do is not get AI. It is to say, is the right person in this house doing the right task? Like, my partner has ADHD and dyslexia. Why was he the one doing our, like, researching insurance and doing our taxes? Like, and he's a former paramedic and firefighter. Why was he the one, like, why am I negotiating with the doctor and being involved in these emergency situations? Like, there were some obvious things that we were like, oh, let's just swap them. And our household got far more efficient in like a day. So I would also say, to anybody listening, is there are a lot of very low to zero tech things that can really help make your household function better by simply acknowledging, observing, and discussing the work. And then my hope is that we can really optimize the shit out of it with technology in the coming months and years.
Right. By the way, have you ever traded chores with like a friend, not your spouse?
Yeah, I have. Not overly since I had kids, I would say.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I have.
Yeah, when I was younger, I like stumbled into this as actually like a major life hack. A friend of mine had, and this will really date the story, a friend of mine had this like massive cell phone overage, and for some sort of surprise reason. So the bill was massive, and just had this like mental block about calling and like trying to deal with it. It was just emotional burden, not the kind of awkward conversation you want to have. So I just literally sat on the couch and called as him, we're sitting next to each other, and like negotiated away the overage, and felt really good about myself, like I could help my buddy, and then like a couple months later, I had a sort of a similar thing. It was just like theoretically an easy job that I just kept putting off because it just felt so emotionally burdensome. I can't make this phone call. So I call up the buddy, right? I'm like, I need you to call his name. Yeah.
It makes,
this is cool.
Makes so much sense. And I know we're almost at time. The one concept I also wanted to bring up here at the end there are tasks that you need to do individually, like taking a test, right? Like if you're in a class, it doesn't make sense to have one person take it. Like, yes, you might all get A's, but the purpose of it is for you to learn it. And so there are tasks that need to be done separately for a reason. And you had brought up like maybe it's your hobby. Like I like gardening and somebody could do it for me, but like I want to get better at it. And this time is a good investment of my time versus a set of things that absolutely do not serve you to do them if somebody else has already done them, right? How do you technically separate those things?
Oh, I know what you mean. Oh my gosh. Right. That's just a hard problem. It's such a, and it's, man, it's a hard problem because you can clearly do it wrong both ways. So I'm sure that we know people who like keep assigning themselves new jobs and they should just stop. They're really like, you're like, Bob, you really need to delegate. Like stop it. Like stop it. But then the opposite is you decide you're really good at 5 things, and so then you're only going to do those 5 things, and you kind of like calcify, right? Like if you want to get good at anything, you have to deal with being incompetent at it first, right? For anything like significant that has, a practice effect. So how the heck do you do this balance, right? I I consider myself an absolute work in progress in this regard, and so that means that it's doubly awkward, right? So I, for instance, am embracing things that I'm not good at, and I'm splashing around in the moat of incompetence and feeling very embarrassed about it because I think of myself as an accomplished, competent person. Now everyone can see how I'm really bad at this, and so all of that's awkward, right? And then there's this second order awkwardness, which is like, and maybe I'm also failing at the meta game of picking which things to try to get good at versus where I should just stay in my zone of competence, right? So if you're failing, you can feel like you're double failing. Yeah. Oof.
It's the cartoon that people have probably seen, but I do think it really matters because the cartoon said, I want AI to do my laundry and my dishes so that I can do art and writing. And we've done the opposite right now where AI is doing the fun parts in some cases. And so
that's right.
What I want to be really conscious of as we're building this and as I'm just personally using technology is making sure I'm using it in a way that makes my life better, but doesn't take away my life. Like I want to live my life. I want to experience it. I want to be present and do things and being very conscious about the things that I have technology do for me or someone else do for me. And how do we, it's constantly a values decision, but it is something I think about. I want personally, as well as the people, any of our customers to have this feel like it enhances their life and not creates a sleepwalker, where you're just like, okay,
absolutely. Well. Yeah. Two of my favorite wisdom traditions, Stoicism and Buddhism, definitely have this problem as well, which is like, in both cases, there's an extraordinary emphasis put on essentially facing adversity and realizing that it's all in your head. But you just can't be complacent about everything, right? Like someone's got to discover the new scientific principles and invent the new tools and like make the world better. So you can't just decide to literally just face every hardship as if it ain't no thing. Like, no, sometimes we're going to be like, screw this hardship. We're going to do something about this one, right? And figuring out like where to draw those battle lines is actually like the work of a lifetime.
Isn't it called optimistic nihilism? I feel like I heard that term where it's
that's
like,
a funny one. Oh my God.
You don't, nothing really matters, but some things have to matter. I don't know. I feel like I saw that on a TikTok. I sometimes pretend I read it, but if I say I read something, it might mean I saw it on TikTok.
Right. Well, I'm certainly an optimist, and but also a realist, right? You got to see problems clearly in order to do anything effective about them. So thank you for helping me see these kinds of invisible problems more clearly. It's been eye opening in a literal and figurative sense.
This has been wonderful. I could spend an hour chatting with you any day of the week. So let me know when you need me back.
All right, thank you. So before I let you go, please tell us where we can learn more about Persist and where we can find more about you personally.
Yeah, our website is timeforpersist.com. And again, I'm Ellie Windle, and you can find more about me on the website or on my LinkedIn. But yeah, I would love for you to check out the site and learn a little bit more about what we do. The app is only $20, so you can always just give it a try. Create that
Nice.
shared awareness.
Right, perfect. All right, thanks again.
Thanks.